I'll never forget the look on her face when she pointed at the pig pen and screamed those words. "Why don't you just go eat with the pigs, Eleanor?" Her voice carried across the farmyard like a whip crack. Two of my farm hands were unloading hay bales near the barn. They stopped mid-lift, turned their heads. One of them, young Tommy, who'd been working here since he was 16, actually laughed. Not a loud laugh, just a quick, nervous chuckle that he tried to swallow back down. But I heard it, and she heard it too. That made her smile. My daughter-in-law Clarissa stood there in my kitchen, wearing a white cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Her perfectly manicured finger was still pointing toward the window, toward the muddy pen where our three pigs snorted and shuffled through their evening feeding time. The autumn sun was setting behind her, casting her shadow long across the checkered tablecloth I'd just set for dinner. On that table sat a pot of beef stew. I'd been cooking it since dawn. Carrots and potatoes from our own garden, meat from cattle we'd raised ourselves, herbs I'd dried last summer. The steam rose up in lazy spirals, filling the kitchen with the kind of warmth that used to mean family, that used to mean home. But standing there, watching this woman who'd married my son treat me like garbage in my own house, I realized something had died here long before she'd opened her mouth. She wrinkled her nose at the stew like it was rotting meat. "I can't believe you still eat like this," she said. Her voice dripped with the kind of disgust most people reserve for roadkill. "It's disgusting. No wonder you smell like the barn half the time." My hands were still holding the ladle. I'd been about to serve our plates. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The words just hung there in the air between us, thick and poisonous. "This is how our family has eaten for generations," I managed to say. My voice came out steady.
"Calm."
Years of practice had taught me how to swallow hurt and keep my face neutral. She smirked. Actually smirked. "Well, times change, Eleanor. You should join the pigs outside since that's where this slop belongs." That's when she raised her voice. That's when she made sure everyone could hear. "Why don't you just go eat with the pigs, Eleanor?" The kitchen fell silent except for the bubbling of the stew and the distant sound of the pigs grunting outside. Through the window, I could see Tommy and Marcus pretending to go back to work, but their shoulders were shaking. They were still laughing. "Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story." Something shifted inside me in that moment. Not anger. Not yet. It was something colder. Something that had been building for months, maybe years, pressed down under layers of politeness and patience and the kind of quiet endurance my father used to call the long game. I looked at Clarissa, really looked at her. At her designer clothes and her city girl confidence. At the way she stood in the middle of my kitchen like she owned it. Like she owned everything. The house. The farm. My son. My life. She thought I was weak. Thought I was just some old woman who'd roll over and take whatever cruelty she wanted to dish out. I lowered my gaze. Let my shoulders slump just a little. Played the part she expected to see. "All right," I whispered. Her smile widened. She'd won. Or so she thought. I set down the ladle carefully, wiped my hands on my apron, and walked toward the back door without another word. My feet moved slow and steady across the worn floorboards. Behind me, I heard her exhale, a satisfied little sound, like she'd just put a disobedient dog in its place. But what Clarissa didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that in that moment, with those words still echoing off the kitchen walls, she'd just planted the seeds of her own destruction. Because this farm wasn't just land and buildings and animals. It was a legacy built on legal foundations she'd never bothered to understand. And I wasn't just some helpless old woman. I was Eleanor Whitlock, 74 years old, widow of Arthur Whitlock, mother of Nathaniel, keeper of secrets, guardian of a family trust with very specific conditions about who controlled what. And I just decided it was time to teach my daughter-in-law exactly what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. What Clarissa didn't know was that in telling me to eat with the pigs, she'd given me the perfect reason to make her do it instead. If you think Eleanor should stand up for herself, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling me what you'd do in her place. Would you walk away like she did? Or would you have fought back right there in that kitchen? And make sure you're subscribed because what happens next is going to shock you. The first time I saw Clarissa, she was stepping out of Nathaniel's truck wearing cream-colored heels that had no business being anywhere near a working farm. It was a Saturday morning in late spring. I'd been up since 5 feeding the chickens and checking on a pregnant heifer in the north pasture. My boots were caked with mud, my hair tied back in a practical bun, and I probably smelled like hay and sweat. When I heard the truck pull up, I wiped my hands on my jeans and headed toward the house, excited to finally meet the woman my son had been talking about for months. She stood there in the driveway, staring at our farmhouse like it was a crime scene. Her nose wrinkled, her perfectly glossed lips pressed into a thin line. She looked at the barn, then at the chicken coop, then down at her shoes, which were already sinking into the soft dirt. "Mom, this is Clarissa," Nathaniel said. His voice had this nervous edge to it, like he was introducing 2 dogs who might not get along. I walked over with my biggest smile, extended my hand. "Welcome to our home, dear. We're so happy to have you here." She looked at my hand for a beat too long before shaking it. Her grip was limp, like touching me might contaminate her somehow. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitlock," she said. Her voice was polite. Cold. The kind of polite that makes you feel dismissed. Back then, I told myself I was being paranoid. First impressions can be misleading, right? Maybe she was just nervous. Maybe city girls need time to adjust to farm life. So I tried harder. I baked her favorite lemon tarts that afternoon. Spent 2 hours getting them perfect. The crust just right, the filling tangy and sweet. When I set them on the table, she glanced at them and said, "Oh, how thoughtful. But I don't really eat sweets. Too many empty calories." Nathaniel ate 3 of them and kept apologizing with his eyes. The next weekend she came back. This time I'd prepared a full Sunday dinner: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans from our garden, fresh-baked rolls. Traditional farm food. The kind of meal that had filled this table for 50 years. She pushed the food around her plate like a child forced to eat vegetables. Finally, she looked up at me with that same tight smile and said, "I don't eat farm food, Mrs. Whitlock. I prefer organic." I set down my fork carefully. "These vegetables are organic, dear. We don't use pesticides on anything we grow." "I mean store-bought organic," she clarified. "Like our food, grown in soil my husband had tended for decades. Wasn't good enough because it didn't have the right label." Nathaniel looked embarrassed, but said nothing. Just kept eating and avoiding eye contact. That's when I started to see the pattern. The way she'd find fault with everything. The way she'd make little comments that sounded polite but landed like insults. The way my son would shrink a little smaller each time she spoke. I thought about Arthur then. About how he used to say, "A woman's true nature shows in how she treats the old and the humble." If that was the measure, Clarissa's nature was screaming at me from across the dinner table. But I'd been raised to give people chances. To believe the best in folks until they proved otherwise. So I kept trying. When they got engaged 6 months later, I gave her my mother's pearl earrings. They'd been in our family for 3 generations. I handed her the velvet box at their engagement party and watched her open it. She looked at the pearls, then at me, then back at the pearls. "These are lovely," she said. "Very vintage." Vintage. Like they were something dusty she'd found at a thrift store instead of precious family heirlooms. She wore them exactly once, at the wedding, and I never saw them again. The wedding itself was another battle. Nathaniel wanted to have the reception right here on the farm. He said it would honor his father's memory, celebrate our family's roots. Clarissa's parents, city people with money and opinions, were horrified. But she agreed eventually, probably because she knew it would look good for her image. I spent weeks preparing. Had the barn cleaned and decorated with fairy lights. Set up long tables under the oak trees Arthur had planted when Nathaniel was born. Made sure every detail was perfect. The day of the wedding, Clarissa's family arrived in expensive cars and designer clothes. They walked around the farm like they were touring a zoo. I heard her mother whisper to someone, "Well, it's certainly rustic." The way she said rustic made it sound like a disease. But the wedding was beautiful. Nathaniel looked so happy. For a moment, watching him dance with Clarissa under those oak trees, I thought maybe I'd been wrong about her. Maybe love would change things. Maybe she'd grow to appreciate this life, this land, this family. That hope lasted exactly 3 weeks. After the honeymoon, Nathaniel brought her home to live with me. The farmhouse was big enough for all of us, and it made financial sense while they saved money. I'd looked forward to having family around again. The house had been too quiet since Arthur died. The first thing Clarissa did was walk through every room with a notepad, making lists. "This place needs serious updating," she announced at dinner that first night. "The kitchen is stuck in the 1970s. The furniture is ancient. And that smell, is that mothballs?" "Cedar," I said quietly. "The chest in the hallway is cedar. It belonged to my grandmother." She wrinkled her nose. "Well, it's got to go, along with most of this other stuff." I looked at Nathaniel, waited for him to say something. Anything. He just stared at his plate and mumbled, "We can talk about it later, honey." But we never did talk about it. Because 2 days later, I came home from the farmer's market to find my kitchen table, Arthur's table, the one he'd built with his own hands when we first got married, stacked in pieces in the barn. In its place was a glass monstrosity that showed every fingerprint and crumb.
Modern. Cold. Wrong.
Surprise, Clarissa said when she saw my face. "I got us a new table. That old wooden thing was falling apart anyway." It wasn't falling apart. It was solid oak, built to last generations. But it was gone. Just like that. Without asking. Without caring. I stood there staring at that glass table, and something inside me cracked. Not broke. Not yet. Just cracked. A hairline fracture that would spread slowly over the coming months. "Do you like it?" she asked. Her voice had a challenge in it, daring me to complain. I smiled. Nodded. "It's very modern." She beamed. "I knew you'd come around. There's so much more I want to do. This whole place has such potential if we just drag it into this century." That night, I went to the barn and ran my hands over Arthur's table. The wood was still smooth, still perfect. I sat on an old hay bale and cried for the first time since his funeral. I didn't know it then, but that was the first crack in the wall of my home. If you've ever felt like someone was trying to erase your history, hit that like button right now. And drop a comment telling me, should Eleanor have put her foot down about that table? Subscribe so you don't miss how Clarissa's true nature slowly came to light, because trust me, this is just the beginning. The curtains came down on a Tuesday morning while I was out tending the garden. I'd sewn those curtains myself 40 years ago. Cream-colored cotton with tiny blue flowers. They'd hung in the living room windows through Nathaniel's entire childhood, through Arthur's illness, through every season and celebration this house had seen. They were part of the walls, part of the memory of this place. When I walked back inside, they were gone, replaced by heavy gray drapes that looked like they belonged in a hotel lobby. Clarissa was standing on a stepladder, adjusting the last panel. Much better, right? Those old things were so dated. "These are blackout curtains, top of the line. I ordered them online." My throat tightened. I would have appreciated being asked. She glanced down at me, one eyebrow raised. Asked, "Eleanor, this is my home too. I can't live in a museum." My home too. Those 3 words felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. But I smiled. Nodded. Walked to my bedroom before she could see my hands shaking. The changes came faster after that. She replaced the living room sofa, Arthur's favorite spot to read, with something white and uncomfortable that no one was allowed to sit on with dirty clothes. She threw out my ceramic cookie jar, the one shaped like a rooster that had sat on the kitchen counter since 1982. Tacky, she'd said, dropping it in the trash. She painted over the height marks on the doorframe where we'd measured Nathaniel's growth every birthday. Covered them with beige paint without mentioning it. I found out when I went to look at them one evening, needing to remember my son as a little boy. Needing proof that he'd once been mine before she'd claimed him. The marks were gone. Erased. Like they'd never existed. When I asked her about it, she looked genuinely confused. Those scribbles? I thought they were just old marks from furniture or something. Why does it matter? He's grown now. Why does it matter? Like 30 years of memories could be painted over and forgotten because they didn't fit her vision of what our house should look like. But the worst part wasn't the things she changed.
It was how she started changing me.
She'd make comments about my clothes. Eleanor, are you really wearing that to town? It's a bit frumpy, don't you think? Or about my cooking. Maybe we should order takeout tonight. Your food is just so heavy. At first, Nathaniel would defend me quietly. Mom's cooking is fine, honey. But his defenses got weaker. Shorter. Eventually, they stopped altogether. Then, the dinner party started. Clarissa began inviting her friends from the city, other young couples with money and opinions and absolutely no interest in farm life. They'd show up in their expensive cars, taking selfies in front of the barn like it was some kind of Instagram backdrop. Farm-to-table experience, she'd caption them, like we were a restaurant instead of a home. She'd set elaborate tables, cook fancy meals she'd learned from YouTube videos, and play hostess while I sat at the far end, invisible. They'd talk about their jobs, their investments, their vacation homes. When they asked about the farm, they directed their questions to Clarissa, not me. So, how long have you been running this place? A woman named Jessica asked her once. Clarissa laughed. Well, technically Eleanor owns it, but Nathaniel and I are really the ones managing everything day to day. It's exhausting, but we're passionate about sustainable agriculture. Sustainable agriculture. She couldn't tell wheat from barley. Didn't know the first thing about crop rotation or soil health or when to plant what. But she smiled at these people like she was running some kind of boutique farm operation. And I sat there, silent, while she took credit for everything Arthur and I had built. One evening, a man named Chad asked me directly, "So, Eleanor, what do you do around here?" Before I could answer, Clarissa jumped in. "Oh, Eleanor mostly rests these days. She's earned it, haven't you? At her age, the physical work is just too demanding." At her age, like I was already halfway to the grave. "I still do plenty," I said quietly. "I handle the chickens, help with the planting, manage the—" "She helps where she can," Clarissa interrupted, patting my hand like I was a child. "We're so grateful. But really, we've taken over most of the operation." The table nodded sympathetically. One woman actually said, "It must be so hard to let go." I wanted to scream. Wanted to tell them that I was up at dawn every morning while Clarissa slept until 9. That I knew every inch of this land, every animal, every crop cycle. That she didn't even know where the well pump was located. But I didn't. I just smiled and excused myself early, claiming fatigue. "See," I heard Clarissa whisper as I left. "She gets tired so easily these days." I stood in the hallway, my hand on the doorframe where Nathaniel's height marks used to be, and felt myself disappearing, being erased from my own life, one comment, one change, one dinner party at a time. The final straw with the socializing came when I overheard her talking to Nathaniel late one night. Their bedroom was above mine, and the old vents carried sound better than they realized. "We need to talk about your mother," Clarissa said. Silence. Then Nathaniel's tired voice. "What about her?" "She needs to understand that things are different now. This is our home, and she's in the way." Every time I try to entertain or make improvements, she looks at me like I'm destroying something sacred. This is her home too, Clarissa. She built this place with my dad. I know, and that's sweet. But maybe she'd be happier somewhere else. There are nice retirement communities in town, places where she could be with people her own age. She'd have activities, friends, proper care. My heart stopped. Retirement community. She wanted to ship me off like unwanted furniture. I'm not putting my mother in a home, Nathaniel said. But his voice lacked conviction, like he was exhausted, like he'd already had this conversation too many times. I'm not saying right away, she continued. But think about it. She's getting older. What happens when she can't take care of herself? We can't be running a farm and playing caretaker. And honestly, Nate, I didn't marry you to live with your mother forever. Another long silence. Then, let's talk about this later. That was all he said. Let's talk about this later. Not absolutely not. Not this is my mother and she stays. Just later. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, listening to them move around above me. In the room where Arthur and I had slept for 43 years before he died. The room I'd given up so they could have the master suite because Clarissa said the guest room was too small. She wasn't just redecorating a house. She was rewriting history. My history. Painting over it, throwing it out, replacing it with her version of what life should look like. And my son, my sweet boy who used to bring me wildflowers and ask me to read him stories under the oak trees, was letting it happen. That night, Nathaniel said nothing when it mattered most. But I remembered every word she said. Stored them away like seeds in winter soil, waiting for the right season to grow. Comment below if you've ever felt pushed aside in your own home. Tell me your story, because I want to hear it. And make sure you're subscribed. What Clarissa does next will make your blood boil. The transformation happened gradually, like watching someone you know turn into a stranger. 3 months after moving in, Clarissa started referring to the farm as ours when talking to outsiders. Our property, she'd say. Our livestock. Our harvest. Like she'd been here for generations instead of seasons. She created an Instagram account called Whitlock Farm Life without asking anyone. Posted carefully staged photos of herself in designer farm boots that had never touched actual mud, holding baskets of vegetables I'd picked, standing in front of equipment she didn't know how to operate. The captions were all about getting back to the land and choosing a simpler life. Her followers ate it up. Within months, she had thousands of people believing she was some kind of farm girl influencer. The worst part? She started believing it herself. One Saturday afternoon, I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when I heard voices outside. I looked through the window and saw Clarissa leading a group of well-dressed people around the property. She was wearing a flowing white dress and a wide-brimmed hat like she was hosting a garden party. "This is our heritage barn," she was saying, gesturing dramatically. "We're thinking of converting it into an event space. You know, rustic weddings, farm-to-table dinners, corporate retreats. The potential is incredible." I went outside. "Clarissa, what's going on?" She turned to me with that bright, fake smile. "Eleanor, these are potential investors. I'm showing them around." "Investors for what?" "For the event venue concept I've been developing. I told you about it, remember?" She hadn't told me anything. And this wasn't her barn to sell or convert or promise to anyone. I kept my voice level. "Could we talk inside for a moment?" "We're kind of in the middle of something," she said, her smile tightening. "Now, please." She excused herself and followed me into the house, her heels clicking sharply on the porch. The second we were inside, her expression changed. "What is your problem?" she hissed. "My problem is that you're making plans for property that isn't yours. You can't just decide to turn the barn into an event space." "Why not? It's sitting there empty. We could be making money. God knows this place barely breaks even as it is." The farm had been profitable for 50 years. But she wouldn't know that because she'd never looked at the actual books. Never cared about the real work. Because it's not your decision to make, I said quietly. She laughed. A sharp, mean sound. You really don't get it, do you? Nathaniel and I are the future of this place. You're the past, Eleanor. And the past needs to make room for progress. Before I could respond, she walked back outside to her investors, leaving me standing in the kitchen with my hands clenched into fists. That evening, I pulled out the farm's financial records. Started really looking at the accounts for the first time in months. What I found made my stomach turn. Unexplained withdrawals. Charges to stores I'd never heard of. Thousands of dollars moving around with vague descriptions like farm improvements and business expenses. I asked Nathaniel about it the next day. Caught him alone in the barn while he was checking on the horses. Son, I need to talk to you about the accounts. He didn't look at me. Just kept brushing the horse's mane. What about them? There are charges I don't recognize. A lot of money being spent without discussion. Clarissa's been handling some of that. She's trying to modernize our systems, get us set up for better profitability. By spending money we haven't budgeted for? Mom, she knows what she's doing. She has a business degree. And I have 50 years of experience keeping this farm running. That should count for something. He finally looked at me then. His eyes were tired, defeated. Can we not do this right now? I'm exhausted. That's what he always said lately. I'm exhausted. Like dealing with his own mother was some kind of burden he couldn't bear. Nathaniel, she's talking about converting the barn. Making plans without consulting anyone. Don't you see what's happening? I see you're refusing to accept that things change. That Clarissa has good ideas. That maybe her way isn't the only way. Each word landed like a punch.
My own son.
Defending her. Choosing her version of reality over mine. Your father built that barn with his own hands, I said softly. And now he's gone, Nathaniel replied. We can't run a farm on memories and sentiment. He walked away, leaving me standing there among the hay bales and old tools, feeling like a ghost in my own life. But I wasn't ready to disappear yet. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. Really watching. I noticed how Clarissa would intercept the mail before I could see it. How she'd take phone calls in private, her voice hushed. How she'd started giving orders to our farmhands like she was their boss. One afternoon, I was in the equipment shed looking for pruning shears when I overheard Tommy talking to Marcus. Did Mrs. Clarissa really tell you to sell those 3 heifers? Tommy asked.
Yeah.
Said they needed the cash flow. Gave me the name of a buyer and everything. My blood went cold. Those heifers were pregnant. Worth far more in a few months when they calved. Selling them now made no financial sense. Unless someone needed quick cash for something else. I found the receipt later, tucked in a drawer in the office. She'd sold them for half what they were worth to some buyer 2 counties over. The money had been deposited and then immediately withdrawn. Where had it gone? I started keeping a notebook, writing down everything. Dates, amounts, conversations I overheard. Every strange transaction, every unexplained decision, every time she made a choice that benefited her but hurt the farm. The evidence piled up slowly, like snow before an avalanche. And then came the dinner party that changed everything. Clarissa decided to host a harvest celebration for her influencer friends. Spent hundreds of dollars on decorations, catered food, professional lighting. She set up the dining room like a magazine spread, with flowers and candles and place cards. I wasn't included in the planning, wasn't asked to help, but I was expected to be there like a decoration myself. The old farm widow, proof of authenticity. That night, I sat at the far end of the table, my own table, in my own house, while Clarissa held court. She told stories about farm life that weren't true. Talked about challenges she'd never faced. Took credit for harvests she hadn't planted. When someone asked about the history of the farm, she actually said, "Well, Eleanor's husband started it, but it was pretty run down when Nathaniel and I took over. We've really transformed it. Rundown. She called Arthur's legacy rundown. I set down my fork carefully. That's not quite accurate, dear. Everyone turned to look at me. Clarissa's smile froze on her face. What do you mean? Asked a woman with purple hair. The farm has been profitable and well-maintained for over 50 years. My husband and I built it from nothing, and it was thriving when Nathaniel brought Clarissa home. Silence fell over the table. Clarissa's face flushed red. Of course, Eleanor, she said through gritted teeth. I just meant we've made improvements, brought things into the modern age. You understand. I understand perfectly, I replied. She stood up quickly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Who wants dessert? I made this amazing chocolate mousse recipe. The conversation shifted, but the damage was done. People were looking at her differently,
questioning.
After everyone left and Nathaniel had gone to bed, Clarissa cornered me in the kitchen. Don't you ever embarrass me like that again, she said, her voice low and venomous. I only told the truth. The truth. She laughed harshly. The truth is that you're a bitter old woman who can't stand that your son moved on. That he found someone better. Someone younger and smarter and more capable. Someone who sells our livestock without permission. Someone who spends farm money on parties and clothes. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. You can't prove any of that. Can't I? We stood there staring at each other, the kitchen suddenly feeling very small. In that moment, I saw her clearly, saw the calculation behind her pretty face, the ambition, the complete lack of respect for anything or anyone that stood in her way. You need to understand something, Eleanor, she said quietly. This farm is going to be mine eventually, one way or another. You can either accept that gracefully, or you can make this ugly. But the outcome will be the same. She walked away, her footsteps echoing through the house. That night, Nathaniel said nothing because he'd slept through the whole confrontation. But I remembered every word she spoke, every threat, every casual cruelty. She walked into that dining room like a queen that evening, performing for an audience who believed her lies. She had no idea it was her coronation and her downfall, all rolled into one carefully orchestrated performance. Like, and share this video if you think silence in moments like these can be just as dangerous as words. Drop a comment telling me what you would have said to Clarissa at that dinner table. Because what happens next will show you exactly why Eleanor's quiet patience was about to become Clarissa's worst nightmare. The autumn harvest came in heavy that year. The best we'd had in a decade. The fields had given everything they had, and the barn was full of wheat, corn, and vegetables that would feed us through winter and beyond. It was tradition to celebrate after harvest. Always had been. Arthur started it when we were young, a simple family dinner to give thanks for the land's bounty. Nothing fancy. Just good food, the people who worked the farm, and gratitude for another successful season. I spent the entire day cooking. Started before dawn, the way I always did. Made a beef stew using vegetables from our garden, meat from our own cattle, herbs I'd dried in late summer. The kind of meal that takes hours but fills a house with warmth. The kind that tastes like memory and effort and love. I set the table the old way. The glass monstrosity Clarissa had brought in had somehow gotten accidentally cracked a month earlier, so I'd quietly replaced it with a sturdy wooden table from the barn. Not Arthur's original, that was still in pieces somewhere, but similar.
Honest. Real.
I laid out the checkered cloth that had covered our table for 30 years. Set out the candles in the simple brass holders Arthur's mother had given us as a wedding gift. Baked fresh bread that morning, the smell filling every corner of the house. By the time the sun started setting, everything was ready. The stew bubbled on the stove, rich and thick. The table looked like it had when Nathaniel was young, when Arthur was alive, when this house felt like a home instead of a battlefield. Nathaniel was running late from a meeting in town. Something about equipment financing. That meant it would just be Clarissa and me for a bit. I heard her heels on the stairs before I saw her. She walked into the kitchen wearing white, always white, like she was afraid the farm might dirty her, and stopped short when she saw the table. Her nose wrinkled immediately. That expression I'd come to know so well. Disgust mixed with condescension. "What's all this?" she asked. "Harvest dinner," I said simply, stirring the stew. "It's tradition." She moved closer to the table, looking at it like it was a museum exhibit of poverty. Picked up one of the cloth napkins, hand-sewn, slightly faded from years of use and washing, and let it drop back onto the plate. "You're serious?" "Of course I'm serious. We do this every year." She let out a long sigh, the kind that said she was dealing with someone hopelessly backward. "Eleanor," she said, her voice dripping with fake patience, "I can't believe you still eat like this." I kept my eyes on the pot. "Like what?" "Like this." She gestured at the whole kitchen. "It's disgusting. Honestly. No wonder you smell like the barn half the time." My hand tightened on the wooden spoon. This is how our family has eaten for generations. "Well, times change." She crossed her arms. "You should join the pigs outside since that's where this slop belongs." The words hung in the air for a moment. I turned to face her slowly. She was pointing, actually pointing toward the window, toward the pig pen where our 3 pigs were settling in for their evening feeding. "Excuse me?" Her face hardened. "You heard me. This food," she gestured at my stew with contempt, "belongs in a trough. And honestly, so do you." Through the window, I could see Tommy and Marcus finishing up the day's work, stacking hay bales near the barn, close enough to hear if someone raised their voice. Clarissa knew that. I could see it in her eyes. She wanted an audience for this, wanted witnesses to watch her put me in my place. She took a breath, and then she screamed it, loud enough for the whole farm to hear. "Why don't you just go eat with the pigs, Eleanor?" Her voice carried across the farmyard like a thunderclap. Outside, Tommy dropped the bale he was holding. Both men turned toward the house. Even from here, I could see their expressions. Shock. Then embarrassment. Then, God help me, amusement. Tommy laughed. Just a quick chuckle he tried to hide behind his hand. But I heard it. Clarissa heard it too. That made her smile wider. She stood there in her perfect white outfit in my kitchen, having just told me to eat with animals, looking pleased with herself. The stew continued bubbling on the stove. The candles flickered. The bread sat warm in its basket. Everything I'd spent the day preparing, reduced to slop. Everything I'd spent my life building, dismissed as fit for pigs. My hands were shaking, not from fear or weakness, from something deeper, something cold and clear and sharp as winter ice. I could have screamed back, could have thrown her out, could have called for Nathaniel, demanded he choose between his mother and his wife right then and there. But I'd learned something in 74 years of life. The loudest response isn't always the strongest one. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is exactly what your enemy doesn't expect. So I lowered my gaze, let my shoulders slump just slightly, played the part of the defeated old woman she wanted to see. "All right," I whispered. Her smile grew. Victory. She'd won. She'd finally broken me. I set down the ladle with exaggerated care, wiped my hands slowly on my apron, moved toward the back door like I was actually going to do it, actually going to walk outside and sit with the pigs because she told me to. Behind me, I heard her exhale, a satisfied little sound. Triumphant. I put my hand on the doorknob, but I didn't turn it. Instead, I stood there for a long moment, my back to her, looking out at the pig pen through the window. The 3 pigs, Hamlet, Beatrice, and Ruth, were snuffling around their feeding trough, content and oblivious to the drama unfolding in the house. Something crystallized in that moment. Something that had been building for months, maybe longer. This farm wasn't just land. It was a legacy built on legal foundations that Clarissa had never bothered to understand. Arthur and I had set up a family trust decades ago.
Careful planning.
Specific conditions about ownership and management. Requirements about stewardship and fraud. Clarissa thought that because Nathaniel would inherit the property, she would eventually control it. She'd assumed. Never asked. Never read the actual documents. Just assumed that marriage gave her automatic rights to everything. But assumption and reality are very different things. I turned around slowly. Clarissa was already walking away, heading toward the living room, probably to text her friends about how she'd just put the old woman in her place. Actually, I said quietly.
She stopped.
Turned back with an annoyed expression. What?
Nothing.
Just you're right. Times do change. Her expression shifted to confusion, but before she could respond, we heard Nathaniel's truck in the driveway. She straightened immediately, smoothed her hair, adjusted her smile, back to playing the perfect wife. Nathaniel walked in tired and dusty, kissing Clarissa on the cheek before noticing the table. This looks great, Mom. Just like old times. Your mother was just about to clean it up, Clarissa said smoothly. I already made other dinner plans for us. That Italian place you like. I watched my son look between us. Saw the question in his eyes. Saw how tired he was. How much easier it would be to just go along with whatever Clarissa wanted. Actually, I said, I'm not feeling well. You two go ahead. I'll just wrap everything up here. Concern flashed across Nathaniel's face. You sure, Mom? Positive. You kids have fun. They left 20 minutes later, Clarissa's heels clicking triumphantly as she walked out. Through the window, I watched their taillights disappear down the long driveway. Then I sat down at that table I'd spent hours preparing, looked at the stew and bread and candles, at the checkered cloth and the simple place settings, at everything Clarissa had dismissed as slop fit for pigs. I pulled out my phone, called Mr. Davenport, our family lawyer. He answered on the second ring. Eleanor, it's late. Everything all right? I need to see you tomorrow morning, I said. It's about the trust. About the farm. There are some things I need to understand. Of course. 9 o'clock. Perfect. I hung up and sat there in the silence. Outside, the pigs were settling down for the night. The farmhands had finished their work and gone home. The land stretched out in every direction, this land that Arthur and I had built together, that had fed our family and our community for half a century. What Clarissa didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that in telling me to eat with the pigs, she'd just given me the perfect justification for what I was about to do. She thought I was weak, thought I'd just take it, roll over, disappear. She had no idea that she'd just planted the seeds of her own destruction, and I was about to water them. If this moment broke your heart too, tap that like button right now. Drop a comment telling me if you think Eleanor should have fought back right there, or if waiting was the smarter move. Subscribe because I promise you, the story's about to turn, and what happens next will make everything worth it. Mr. Davenport's office smelled like old books and coffee that had been sitting too long. I sat across from him the next morning, my hands folded in my lap, watching him pull out a thick manila folder from his filing cabinet. Arthur's handwriting was on the tab. Seeing it made my chest tight. I haven't looked at these documents in years, Mr. Davenport said, settling into his chair. He was 70 himself, with wire-rimmed glasses and the careful manner of someone who'd spent a lifetime dealing with other people's problems. But I remember when Arthur insisted on setting up this trust. He was very specific about the conditions. Remind me, I said quietly. He opened the folder, spreading papers across the desk. The Whitlock Family Trust holds all farm assets, the land, buildings, equipment, livestock, and operational accounts. Upon Arthur's death, you became the primary trustee. Upon your death, or if you choose to step down, Nathaniel becomes trustee. But not owner?
Correct.
The trust owns everything. The trustee manages it, but under strict conditions. He ran his finger down a page. The land cannot be sold or subdivided without unanimous agreement from all living trust beneficiaries. The farm must remain operational and profitable. And here's the key part. If the current trustee engages in fraud, mismanagement, or violation of the trust's purpose, control can be temporarily or permanently revoked. My heart started beating faster. What constitutes mismanagement? Unauthorized sale of assets, misuse of trust funds, actions that harm the farm's viability or legacy. He looked up at me over his glasses. Eleanor, why are you asking? I reached into my purse and pulled out my notebook, the one I'd been keeping for weeks.
Set it on his desk.
Because I think my daughter-in-law has been doing all of those things. For the next hour, I walked him through everything. The sold heifers, the unexplained withdrawals, the expensive purchases disguised as farm expenses, the plans to convert the barn without authorization. Every date, every amount, every conversation I'd documented. Mr. Davenport's expression grew more serious with each page he examined. This is substantial, he said finally. If even half of this is accurate, there are grounds for legal action. But Eleanor, you need to understand something. Nathaniel is married to her. Legally, things get complicated. Nathaniel isn't the trustee yet, I pointed out. I am. And she's been acting like she has authority she doesn't possess.
True.
But if we pursue this, it could destroy your relationship with your son. I thought about Nathaniel, about the boy who used to help me feed chickens, about the man who now avoided my eyes when his wife dismissed me, about the future where I'd be shipped off to a retirement home while Clarissa erased everything Arthur and I had built. My relationship with my son is already damaged, I said. She's made sure of that. But maybe if he sees the truth, really sees it, there's a chance to save him before it's too late. Mr. Davenport nodded slowly. What do you want to do? I want documentation. Official documentation. I want to know exactly what's been taken and where it went. I want proof that would hold up legally if it came to that. That will take time. We'll need to audit the accounts, possibly hire an investigator. How much time? A few weeks, maybe a month. I thought about that, about continuing to live in that house, watching Clarissa parade around like she owned everything, waiting for the right moment. 1 month, I agreed. But Mr. Davenport, I want this airtight. When I'm ready to act, I don't want there to be any question about what she's done. He extended his hand. I'll start immediately. I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope. Not quite revenge. Something in between. Purpose, maybe. Direction. I drove back to the farm slowly, watching the fields roll past. Everything looked the same as it always had. The fence posts Arthur had replaced 20 years ago. The irrigation system we'd installed together. The rows of crops we'd planted with our own hands. This land had memory. It remembered every seed, every season, every sacrifice. And it would remember Clarissa too, whether she wanted it to or not. When I got home, her car was in the driveway. I found her in the kitchen on her phone, laughing about something. She looked up when I walked in. Where were you? Doctor's appointment. I lied smoothly. Everything okay? Just routine checkups. You know how it is at my age. She went back to her phone, already losing interest. To her, I was just the old woman. Harmless.
Defeated.
That's exactly what I wanted her to think. Over the next few weeks, I became a shadow in my own house.
Quiet.
Unobtrusive. I stopped challenging her about anything. When she made changes, I smiled and nodded. When she hosted her friends, I stayed in my room. When she gave orders to the farmhands, I pretended not to notice. She thought she'd won. I could see it in how she carried herself. More confident. More careless. And careless people make mistakes. I started finding things. Little things at first. A receipt for a weekend trip to a spa she claimed was a farming conference. Credit card statements showing purchases at designer stores, charged to the farm account under equipment and supplies. Text messages she'd left open on the kitchen counter, planning business ventures with her friends using farm assets as collateral. I photographed everything, documented everything, added it all to my notebook, and sent copies to Mr. Davenport. The farmhands noticed something was different about me, but they couldn't quite figure out what. Tommy approached me one afternoon while I was checking on the chickens. "Mrs. Eleanor, you okay? You've been awful quiet lately." I smiled at him. "Sweet boy." And awful quiet lately. I smiled at him. Sweet boy. Only 23, but he worked harder than anyone. "I'm fine, Tommy. Just tired. If you don't mind me saying, Mrs. Clarissa's been, well, she's been pretty rough on you." "Have you noticed anything else about Mrs. Clarissa?" I asked casually. He shifted uncomfortably. "Like what? Like maybe decisions she's made that don't quite add up?" He looked around, making sure we were alone. "She sold those heifers for way less than they were worth. And she's been talking about selling some of the equipment too.
Says it's outdated.
But that harvester? It's only 3 years old and runs perfect." "Did she tell you to sell it?" "Not yet. But she's been asking questions, getting estimates." I patted his arm. "Thank you for telling me. Mrs. Eleanor, I don't know what's going on, but this is your farm. Always has been. Some of us remember that." After he walked away, I stood there among the chickens, feeling something shift. I wasn't alone in this. The land remembered. The workers remembered. Even the animals, in their way, knew who belonged here and who didn't. Clarissa had forgotten the most important rule of farm life. You can't fake roots. Either you're planted deep or you're not. And she was nothing but shallow soil, pretty on the surface, but hollow underneath. 3 weeks after my meeting with Mr. Davenport, he called. "I have everything you need," he said. "Can you come by tomorrow?" "I'll be there." That night at dinner, Clarissa announced she was planning another party. A fall showcase, she called it. "I want to invite everyone important. Show them what we've built here." What we've built. Still using that word like she'd earned it. "That sounds lovely," I said mildly. Nathaniel looked surprised. "Really? You're okay with it?" "Why wouldn't I be? This is Clarissa's home, too." I used her own words against her, watching her face light up with triumph. "See, Nate? Your mother's finally coming around. She thought I was surrendering, accepting my place as the old woman in the corner while she took over everything. She had no idea she was walking straight into her own trap. The soil remembers everything that's buried in it. Every seed, every secret, every lie. And I've been planting carefully for weeks, waiting for the right season to let everything grow. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because this is where Eleanor's plan starts to bloom. Comment below if you've ever had to play the long game to get justice. What happened next will blow your mind. The evidence folder Mr. Davenport handed me the next morning was 3 inches thick. I sat in his office again, the late autumn sun streaming through the windows, and looked at what months of careful investigation had uncovered. Bank statements, receipts, email printouts, witness testimonies from Tommy and 2 other farmhands. Even security footage from the farm supply store showing Clarissa returning equipment for cash refunds she never reported. "It's worse than you thought," Mr. Davenport said, his voice grave. "She's been systematically draining resources. Not enough to be obvious month to month, but over 8 months? She's taken nearly $40,000. 40,000. My hands trembled holding the papers. "Some purchases were legitimate on the surface," he continued. "But then she'd return items, pocket the refund, and report them as business expenses. She sold livestock and equipment without authorization. She even forged her signature on 2 bank withdrawal forms." "Forged my signature?" He showed me the documents. There was my name, but the handwriting was all wrong. Too smooth. Too perfect. She'd practiced it, probably tracing it from old papers until she got it right enough to fool a bank teller who didn't know any better. This is fraud, I said quietly.
Yes, it absolutely is.
The question is what you want to do about it. I stared at the papers spread across his desk. Evidence of betrayal in black and white. My son's wife, stealing from the family that had welcomed her. Erasing legacy one transaction at a time. Can we reverse the trustee situation? Make it so she has no access. Based on this evidence, yes. You have grounds to petition for immediate suspension of any rights she might claim through marriage. The trust language is clear. Fraud voids all claims. But Eleanor, this won't be quiet. If you do this, it becomes public. Legal. Your son will have to choose sides.
He already has chosen, I said.
He chose to look the other way while she destroyed everything his father and I built. Maybe it's time he sees what that choice really means. Mr. Davenport leaned back in his chair. There's another angle here. The forged signatures alone constitute criminal fraud. You could press charges if you wanted to. I don't want her in jail, I said quickly. I'm not cruel. I just want her away from my farm and my family. I want my son to wake up and see who he married. Then we'll prepare a civil case. Document everything, file with the court to protect the trust, and present Nathaniel with the reality of the situation. If he wants to stay married to her, that's his choice. But she won't have access to your assets. How long? I can have papers ready in a week. I thought about Clarissa's planned party. Her fall showcase, where she'd preen for her friends and take credit for decades of work she'd never done. Make it 2 weeks, I said. I want to do this at the right moment. Mr. Davenport raised an eyebrow. You have something in mind? She wants to show everyone what she's built. I think it's only fair that everyone sees the complete picture. He almost smiled. Almost. I'll have everything ready. But Eleanor, be careful. Cornered animals can be dangerous. I drove home thinking about that. About danger and consequences and the difference between justice and revenge. My father used to say they were cousins, close enough to be confused, but fundamentally different at their core. Justice was about balance. Revenge was about pain. I wanted balance. Wanted the scales to tip back to truth after months of living in Clarissa's carefully constructed fiction. Back at the farm, I found her in what used to be Arthur's office, now completely redecorated with white furniture and motivational posters about manifesting abundance. She was on her laptop, probably updating her Instagram with more fake farm life content. Eleanor, she said without looking up, I need you to stay out of the house next Saturday. I'm having photographers come to shoot content for my social media, and I need the place to look cohesive. Your room especially. It's very dated. Of course, I said pleasantly. Whatever you need. She glanced up, surprised by my compliance. Really? Really? It's your day. I won't get in the way. Suspicion flickered across her face, but she couldn't quite figure out what to be suspicious of. I was being too agreeable. Too easy.
Well,
good. Thank you. I went in my room and pulled out my notebook. Added one final entry. October 28th, Clarissa planning photo shoot and content creation using farm as backdrop. Claims ownership of property in front of witnesses. Every word, every action, all of it documented. That evening, Nathaniel came home exhausted as usual. Clarissa immediately started talking about her party plans, about the photographer, about some influencer friends who might attend. He just nodded along, barely listening, shoveling food into his mouth like it was fuel instead of a meal. I watched him and felt my heart break a little. This wasn't the man I'd raised. The boy who used to ask questions about everything, who'd help me plant gardens and repair fences and learn the names of every bird that nested in our trees. That boy was buried under years of making peace, avoiding conflict, choosing the path of least resistance until he'd lost himself completely. After dinner, I caught him alone on the porch. He was staring out at the fields, his hands wrapped around a beer bottle. Son, I said softly. Can I ask you something? Sure, Mom. Are you happy? He didn't answer right away. Just kept staring at the horizon where the sun was setting, painting everything gold and red. That's a complicated question, he finally said. It shouldn't be. Maybe not, but it is. He took a long drink. I love her, Mom. I know you two don't get along, but I love her. She's ambitious. She wants things for us. For the farm. What things? Progress.
Growth.
She has vision. And what do I have? He looked at me then. Really looked at me for the first time in months. You have history. You have Dad's legacy. You have the past. And the past doesn't matter? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. We stood there in silence, the evening sounds of the farm surrounding us. Crickets. The distant lowing of cattle. Whined through the oak trees Arthur had planted. Mom, I know this has been hard for you. The changes. Having to share your space. But you have to understand, Clarissa and I are building a life together. That means making decisions about the future. Even if those decisions destroy the foundation, nothing's being destroyed. Just updated.
I wanted to tell him right then.
Wanted to show him the folder sitting in Mr. Davenport's office with all the proof of what his wife had been doing. Wanted to wake him up to reality. But I didn't. Because some lessons have to be learned the hard way. Some people have to hit bottom before they can find their way back up. I hope you're right, I said instead. He kissed my forehead like I was the child and he was the parent. Try to give her a chance, okay? For me. I nodded. Let him think I was surrendering. Over the next week, Clarissa's party planning went into overdrive. She hired caterers, rented furniture, brought in a florist, spent money like water, all of it coming from farm accounts. I documented every penny. She also started hinting more openly about my future living arrangements. You know, Eleanor, I saw this wonderful retirement community in town. They have bridge games and garden clubs. You'd probably love it. Probably, I agreed. And it would give Nate and me more space. We're thinking about starting a family soon, and we'd need your room for a nursery. My room. The one I'd slept in since Arthur died. The one that used to be the guest room before I gave up the master suite for them. That makes sense, I said calmly. She studied me, trying to figure out if I was being genuine or sarcastic. You're being really agreeable lately. I'm tired of fighting, Clarissa.
You were right.
Times change. Maybe it's time I accepted that. She smiled then, wide and genuine and full of victory. I'm glad you're finally seeing reason. We could have avoided so much tension if you'd just been willing to adapt from the beginning. You're absolutely right, I said. That night, I called Mr. Davenport. Is everything ready? Signed, sealed, and ready to deliver.
Good.
I'll need you at the farm next Saturday. Around 7 in the evening.
Can you make it?
I'll be there. Eleanor, are you sure about this? I thought about Arthur. About the life we'd built. About the boy we'd raised who'd somehow lost his way. About the woman who'd stolen from us, lied to us, and tried to erase us from our own story. I've never been more sure of anything, I said. Piece by piece, her empire was crumbling, and she didn't even hear the cracks. She was too busy posting photos and planning parties and counting money that was never hers to begin with. Too busy building her castle on sand to notice the tide coming in. Drop a comment if you've ever taken the quiet route to justice. Tell me about a time when patience paid off. And make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because Eleanor's patience is about to pay off in the most spectacular way. The morning of Clarissa's party, I woke up to find her directing workers like a general commanding troops. No, the tables go there. The lighting needs to be softer. This isn't soft. Does this look soft to you? She was wearing her director voice, the one she used when she wanted people to know she was in charge. The farm had been transformed. White tents dotted the lawn. Strings of Edison bulbs hung between the oak trees. Furniture I'd never seen before, sleek and modern and completely out of place, had been arranged in careful clusters. Even the barn had been decorated, its rustic doors thrown open to reveal tables set with white linens and fall centerpieces. It looked beautiful, expensive, like something from a magazine spread about farm weddings. It looked nothing like our farm. "What do you think?" Clarissa asked, appearing beside me. She was wearing a flowing dress the color of autumn leaves, her hair and makeup already camera-ready, even though guests wouldn't arrive for hours. "It's very impressive," I said honestly. "I know, right? This is exactly the vision I've been talking about. The potential this place has if someone just thinks bigger." She gestured expansively. "I'm calling it Heritage and Future, the new Whitlock Farm. I'm documenting everything for my social media. This could really put us on the map."
Us.
Always us, like she'd been here from the beginning. "I'll stay out of your way," I told her. "Actually, I was hoping you'd be here. For photos. You know, the matriarch passing the torch to the next generation. Very symbolic. My followers would eat it up." "Of course," I said. "Whatever you need." She looked at me suspiciously again. "You're being really cooperative." "I told you. I'm tired of fighting." She nodded, satisfied. "Good. Be ready around 6. That's when the photographer will want to do the family shots." I spent the day in my room, watching through the window as her party took shape. Caterers arrived with warming trays and champagne. A DJ set up equipment in the barn. Clarissa's influencer friends started showing up early, already taking selfies and squealing over the aesthetic. At 5 o'clock, my phone buzzed. "Mr. Davenport. On my way. Everything's ready." I texted back. "See you at 7. Then I got dressed. Not in my usual simple clothes, but in the navy dress I'd worn to Arthur's funeral. The good pearls. My mother's brooch. If this was going to be a performance, I was going to look the part. At 6, Clarissa knocked on my door. "Eleanor? The photographer's ready." I opened the door. She blinked, taking in my outfit. "You look nice." "Thank you, dear. Where do you want me?" We walked outside together. The party was in full swing now. 50 people, maybe more, milling around with drinks and appetizers. They'd transformed the farm into something unrecognizable, beautiful in its way, but wrong, like putting a fancy hat on a workhorse. The photographer positioned us near the barn, Clarissa in the center, naturally, Nathaniel beside her looking uncomfortable in a blazer, me off to the side, the old woman in the background. "Perfect," the photographer said. "This really captures the generational transition." Clarissa beamed. "That's exactly what I want to show. How we're honoring the past while building the future." She gave a speech then, standing on a small platform someone had set up. Talked about the farm's history, though she got several facts wrong. Talked about Arthur, though she'd never met him. Talked about taking the reins and ushering in a new era. People clapped, raised their glasses, took videos on their phones. I stood at the edge of the crowd and waited. At 7 o'clock exactly, I saw Mr. Davenport's car turn into the driveway. He parked away from the other vehicles, quietly, and I moved through the crowd to meet him. He handed me a leather portfolio. "Everything's inside. Do you want me to?" "No," I said. "I need to do this." "Eleanor, I have to ask one more time. Are you absolutely certain?" I looked back at the party. At Clarissa holding court, surrounded by admirers. At Nathaniel standing beside her looking lost. At my farm dressed up like something it wasn't. "I've never been more certain," I said. I walked back to the platform where Clarissa was still mingling. Tapped a fork against a glass until the crowd quieted. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice carrying across the lawn. "But I have a few things I'd like to say." Clarissa's smile froze. "Eleanor, we're in the middle of. This won't take long." I opened the portfolio. Clarissa has been talking about heritage and future, about generations passing torches. I think it's important that everyone here understands what that really means. Mom, Nathaniel said quietly, a warning in his voice. I ignored him. This farm has been in our family for 53 years. My husband Arthur and I built it from nothing. We poured our lives into this land, this legacy. We set up legal protections to ensure it would continue beyond our lifetimes. People were listening now. Phone cameras were still recording. Clarissa's face had gone pale. Those protections include very specific conditions about stewardship, about honoring the trust that holds these assets, about not engaging in fraud or mismanagement. What are you doing? Clarissa hissed. I pulled out the first document. Over the past 8 months, $40,000 has been withdrawn from farm accounts without authorization. Livestock has been sold below market value. Equipment has been returned for cash refunds that were never reported. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mom, stop, Nathaniel said louder now. Your wife also forged my signature on bank documents. I held up the withdrawal forms. That's fraud, Nathaniel. Criminal fraud. Clarissa's face had gone from pale to red. This is ridiculous. Those are lies. She's trying to. I have documentation. I continued, my voice steady. Bank statements. Receipts. Witness testimony from farmhands. Security footage. All of it verified by our family attorney. I gestured to Mr. Davenport, who'd moved closer to the platform. The crowd had gone completely silent. Phone cameras were definitely recording now. The trust that holds this farm has a very clear clause, I said. If the designated trustee, or anyone acting on their behalf, engages in fraud or mismanagement, control reverts to the previous trustee. That's me. I pulled out the legal papers. As of this morning, I have filed an emergency petition to suspend any access to farm assets. The bank accounts have been frozen pending investigation. All decision-making authority has been restored to my sole discretion. You can't do this, Clarissa said, her voice shrill now. I already have. I looked at her directly. You wanted to show everyone what you'd built here. I think they should see the complete picture. She was shaking. With rage or fear or both, I couldn't tell. Nathaniel, say something. Tell her she can't. But Nathaniel was staring at me with his mouth open, finally understanding what had been happening under his nose all along. Son, I said quietly, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you need to see the truth. Your wife has been stealing from us, from your father's legacy. She forged my name. She sold your father's livestock for a fraction of their worth. She's been planning to convert the barn into an event space without legal authority to do so. That's not, Clarissa started. It's all documented, Mr. Davenport interjected, stepping forward. Mrs. Whitlock has substantial evidence of fraud and mismanagement. If you'd like to review the materials, I can arrange that. But legally speaking, her actions today are fully justified under the terms of the Whitlock Family Trust. The crowd was murmuring now. Clarissa's influencer friends were backing away, no longer wanting to be associated with whatever scandal was unfolding. Clarissa turned to the remaining guests with desperate eyes. She's lying. She's a bitter old woman who can't stand that her son moved on. This is all. The evidence speaks for itself, I said calmly, and it's available for anyone who wants to see it. Nathaniel finally found his voice. Mom, is this true? All of it. I handed him the portfolio. Read it yourself. It's all there. He took it with trembling hands, opening it to reveal page after page of evidence. His face changed as he read.
Shock.
Disbelief. Dawning horror. Clarissa, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She grabbed his arm. Baby, I can explain. It's not what it looks like. I was trying to... You forged my mother's signature? He held up the bank documents. This is her name, but it's not her handwriting. Silence. Answer me, he demanded. More silence. Then, finally, tears. I was doing it for us. For our future. She was holding us back, keeping everything stuck in the past. I was trying to move us forward. By stealing? His voice was getting louder. By lying? By committing fraud? I was trying to build something. Something bigger than just this farm. I have vision, Nate. I have plans. Your mother doesn't understand business. She doesn't understand. She understands loyalty. He cut her off. She understands integrity. She understands not stealing from the people who welcomed you into their home. The party had completely fallen apart now. Guests were leaving, whispers and phone cameras capturing everything. Clarissa's carefully curated image was crumbling in real time. She turned to me, and for a moment I saw past the makeup and the designer clothes to something desperate and mean underneath. You think you've won? She spat. You think this changes anything? Nathaniel loves me. He's my husband. You can't erase that. I'm not trying to erase anything, I said calmly. I'm trying to protect what matters. What's real. What my husband and I spent our lives building. You wanted to play Queen of the Farm, Clarissa. But you forgot, this isn't a stage. It's a legacy. And legacies don't belong to people who steal them. I looked at the devastated party around us. At the expensive decorations that would be gone tomorrow. At the carefully constructed image now shattered beyond repair. I think it's time for everyone to go home, I said. She walked into that dining platform like a queen that evening, performing for an audience who believed her lies. She had no idea it was her coronation and her downfall, all rolled into one carefully orchestrated performance. Like this video if you're ready for the final chapter. Comment "Justice served" if you loved this moment. And make sure you're subscribed because the ending will blow your mind. The farm was silent the next morning in a way it hadn't been in months. The white tents had been taken down overnight by workers who'd probably heard what happened and wanted nothing to do with the aftermath. The rental furniture was gone. The Edison bulbs were dark. Everything had been stripped away, leaving just the farm, the real farm, standing in the morning light. I was feeding the chickens when Nathaniel found me. He looked terrible, eyes red, face unshaven, like he hadn't slept at all, which he probably hadn't. Mom, he said. His voice was rough.
Broken.
I set down the feed bucket and waited. I read everything. All of it. Every document, every statement, every piece of evidence. He wiped his eyes. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I do, though. I have to say I'm sorry. I should have seen it.
Should have listened to you.
Should have stood up for you instead of. He couldn't finish the sentence. I walked over to him, put my hand on his arm. You loved her. Love makes us blind sometimes. That's not an excuse.
No.
It's not, but it's human. We stood there for a moment, father and son reversed, me comforting him instead of the other way around. Where is she? I asked. Packing. I told her she had until noon to take her personal belongings and leave. Everything else stays here. She tried to argue, but he shook his head. I can't even look at her, Mom. I keep seeing that signature on the bank forms and knowing she traced your handwriting. Knowing she practiced faking it until she got it good enough to steal from you.
From us.
From Dad's memory. What are you going to do? I called a lawyer this morning. Not Mr. Davenport. A different one. For the divorce. The words seemed to hurt coming out. It'll take time. These things always do. But I can't stay married to someone who'd do this. I thought about Clarissa upstairs right now, probably crying, probably still thinking she was the victim in all this. Probably texting her friends about the crazy old lady who'd ruined everything. I'm sorry it came to this, I said. I'm not. He looked at me with something like wonder. Mom, you could have just told me. Could have shown me the evidence privately. Why did you wait? Why did you do it at the party? I thought about how to answer that. About justice versus revenge. About lessons that need to be public to really stick. Because she needed to understand consequences, I said finally. She spent months building an image, taking credit for things she didn't do, performing for cameras. I wanted her to see that image shatter. Wanted her friends and followers to see who she really was. Not for revenge, for truth. So, she couldn't spin it later. So there was no question about what actually happened. He nodded slowly. You're tougher than I gave you credit for. Your father used to say the strongest steel gets forged in the hottest fire. We heard a car door slam. Through the window, we could see Clarissa loading suitcases into her Mercedes, the one she'd bought with farm money 6 months ago, claiming it was necessary for business meetings. She didn't come to say goodbye. Didn't try to defend herself one more time. Just loaded her car and drove away, gravel spraying under her tires as she fled. Nathaniel and I watched her taillights disappear down the long driveway. What happens now? He asked. Now we rebuild. The farm. Our relationship. Everything she damaged. Can we really come back from this? I looked at my son. Really looked at him. At the man who'd lost his way, but was trying to find it again. At the boy I'd raised who was still in there somewhere. Your father and I rebuilt this farm from nothing 3 times, I said. Once after flood. Once after a drought. Once after the bank nearly foreclosed. We always found a way. Because that's what you do when something matters. You don't give up. You rebuild. Over the next few days, we started putting things right. Nathaniel and I went through every account, every transaction, working with Mr. Davenport to document what could be recovered and what was simply gone. Some of the money we could trace. Most of it Clarissa had already spent on clothes, trips, investments in her friends' failed business ventures. It was gone. The livestock she'd sold were scattered to various buyers. Some we could buy back. Others were lost for good. But some things could be restored. I found Arthur's table in the barn where Clarissa had stored it. The pieces were still there, still solid. Nathaniel and I spent a weekend reassembling it, working side by side like we used to when he was young. I miss this, he said, fitting a mortise joint back together. Just working with you. No drama. No performance. Just work. Me too, son. We brought the table back inside. Put it in its proper place. Set it with the checkered cloth and the simple dishes. It looked right. It looked like home. Tommy and the other farm hands started treating me differently too. Not with pity or awkwardness, but with respect. They'd seen what happened at the party. Everyone had seen it, thanks to all those phone cameras. The story had spread through the county within hours. Mrs. Eleanor, Marcus said one afternoon, I just want to say, what you did took guts. A lot of folks would have just taken it, let themselves get pushed out, but you stood your ground. I just protected what was mine, I said. No, ma'am. You protected what was right. There's a difference. Word got back to me about Clarissa through the grapevine. She'd moved back to the city, staying with her parents. Her Instagram account had been flooded with comments after videos from the party went viral. She'd deleted everything and disappeared from social media entirely. Some of her influencer friends had made their own posts, distancing themselves, explaining they had no idea what was really happening behind the scenes. Her reputation was destroyed. Not because I'd set out to destroy it, but because the truth had a way of spreading faster than lies ever could. One evening, about 2 weeks after the party, I was making dinner, that same beef stew, the one Clarissa had called slop, when Nathaniel came into the kitchen. I need to tell you something, he said. I turned down the heat and gave him my full attention. Clarissa called today. She wants to negotiate the divorce settlement. She's claiming she deserves half of everything because we were married. My blood went cold. The farm? She can't touch the farm. Mr. Davenport made that very clear. The trust protects it. But she's claiming she's entitled to compensation for her contributions and for emotional distress. I almost laughed. Emotional distress. After what she did. Her lawyer is trying to spin it like you orchestrated a public humiliation campaign. Like the party was a trap designed to embarrass her. It was a trap, I said honestly. but not to embarrass her. To reveal her. There's a difference. I know. And my lawyer knows. But she's going to fight this, Mom. She's not going quietly.
I thought about that.
About Clarissa backed into a corner, desperate, lashing out. About how this could drag on for months, maybe years. Let her fight, I said finally. We have the evidence. We have the truth. And we have something she never had. We have roots here. Deep ones. She can hire all the lawyers she wants, but this land knows who belongs to it. Nathaniel smiled for the first time in weeks. Dad would have said something like that. Your father was a wise man. We ate dinner together that night at Arthur's table. Just the two of us. No performance. No cameras. No pretending. Just mother and son, sharing a meal in the house they'd both grown up in. This stew is really good, Nathaniel said. It's the same recipe I've been making for 40 years. I know. I missed it. He set down his spoon. Mom, I have an idea. About the farm. What kind of idea? What if we did something Clarissa wanted to do, but the right way? What if we actually did open the barn for events, but on our terms? Authentic farm experiences. Educational workshops for kids. Real farm-to-table dinners that actually celebrate what we do here. Not some Instagram fantasy, but the real thing. I considered that. It wasn't a bad idea, actually. We'd need help. Need to make sure it doesn't interfere with the actual farming. We could hire people. Create jobs for the community. Make it sustainable. He was getting excited now, the way he used to when he was younger and full of plans. We could call it the Arthur Whitlock Heritage Center. Honor Dad. Show people what real farm life looks like. Your father would have liked that. We spent the next hour planning, sketching ideas on napkins, talking about possibilities. It felt good. It felt like we were building something together instead of watching someone else tear things down. 3 weeks later, on a cold November morning, I was in the barn when I heard a car pull up. Not Clarissa's Mercedes. Something smaller. Older. I walked outside and saw her standing by a beaten-up Honda that definitely wasn't hers. She looked different. No designer clothes. No perfect makeup. Just jeans and a plain sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Eleanor, she said. I waited. I came to... She stopped. Started again. I came to get a few things I left behind. Nathaniel said it was okay if I came by when you were here. What things? Some books. A photo album. Small stuff. I nodded. I'll walk with you. We went into the house together. The silence was heavy. Awkward. She gathered her items quickly, not meeting my eyes. At the door, she paused. I want you to know something, she said quietly. I didn't come here planning to do what I did. I really did love Nathaniel. At first. But then I got caught up in it. The image. The followers. The idea of being someone important. I lost myself in the performance. She finally looked at me. You were right. About everything. I was erasing you. I was stealing. I was turning something real into something fake. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to hear it. Because... She took a shaky breath. Because what you did at that party, it wasn't just about punishing me. It was about showing me who I'd become. And I hated it. Hated seeing myself through everyone else's eyes. But I needed to see it. I studied her face, looking for manipulation, for another performance. But all I saw was exhaustion and something that might have been genuine regret. What will you do now? I asked. I don't know. My parents barely speak to me. My friends all dropped me. I'm staying in a studio apartment and working retail to pay my legal bills. She laughed bitterly. Quite a fall from farm influencer to discount store cashier. That's called consequences, I said. Not unkindly. Just factually. I know. She shifted the box in her arms. For what it's worth, I am sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. doesn't undo the damage. But I am. I watched her walk back to her borrowed car and drive away. Felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. Just emptiness where anger used to be. Justice had been served. The accounts were being restored. The farm was protected. My relationship with Nathaniel was healing. But standing there watching Clarissa disappear for what I knew would be the last time, I realized something my father had tried to teach me 50 years ago. Revenge makes you feel powerful in the moment. But justice? Justice just makes you feel tired. For the first time in months, Clarissa had nothing to say. No performance. No spin. No carefully crafted image to hide behind. Just the truth, naked and unforgiving, staring back at her from 100 phone screens and twice as many witnesses. Comment just deserved if this moment gave you the closure you needed. Hit that like button if you think Eleanor handled this the right way. And keep watching because the final chapter reveals a twist that changes everything. Spring came early that year. By April, the fields were already green with new crops. The barn, Arthur's barn, had been renovated not into some sterile event space, but into a working education center. We'd installed observation windows so school groups could watch actual farming. Set up demonstration areas where kids could learn about soil and seeds and seasons. The Arthur Whitlock Heritage Center opened on what would have been his 75th birthday. Nathaniel had worked harder on that project than I'd seen him work on anything in years. Like he was trying to make up for lost time, for poor choices, for the months he'd stood by while someone tried to erase his father's memory. The divorce had finalized in March. Clarissa got nothing from the farm. The trust had protected it completely. She'd walked away with her personal belongings, her car, and a legal bill that would take her years to pay off. No influencer sponsorships would be coming her way. No brand deals. No carefully curated farm life fantasy. Just real life. The kind that doesn't come with filters. I was in the garden one Saturday morning when Mr. Davenport called. "Eleanor, I have some news you should hear." "What kind of news?" "It's about Clarissa. She filed for bankruptcy last week. And..." He paused. "She's been charged with fraud by the district attorney. The forged signatures triggered an investigation. It's going to trial." I sat down on the garden bench Arthur had built. "I didn't ask for that. I know. But once the evidence became public record, the DA didn't have a choice. Forgery and fraud are criminal offenses. Your civil case was one thing. This is another. What will happen to her? Hard to say. Could be probation. Could be jail time. Depends on the judge." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time thinking about consequences. About how one moment of cruelty, screaming at an old woman to eat with pigs, had unraveled an entire life. Nathaniel found me there an hour later. "You heard?" he asked. "Mr. Davenport called." He sat beside me. "How do you feel about it?" "Honestly, I feel tired. I never wanted her in jail. I just wanted her away from our farm, away from our family." "Sometimes consequences choose themselves," he said. "You didn't file criminal charges. You just documented the truth. What happened after that, that was on her." We sat in silence, watching the chickens peck around the yard. The same chickens I'd been feeding for years. The same yard where Nathaniel had played as a boy. The same bench where Arthur used to sit and plan the next season's planting. Everything was the same, but everything was different. "Mom," Nathaniel said quietly, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you." "What's that?" "I've been talking to Mr. Davenport about the trust. About my future role." He took a breath. "I want to add a provision. One that ensures what happened with Clarissa can never happen again." "What kind of provision?" "I want to establish a board. Not just family members, but long-time farmhands. People who've proven their commitment to this place. People like Tommy and Marcus. So no one person, not even me, can make unilateral decisions about the farm's future." I looked at my son with new eyes. "That's very wise. I learned from the best." He smiled. Well, eventually I learned. Took me long enough. Better late than never. We worked in the garden together that afternoon, planting tomatoes and peppers, our hands in the same soil Arthur had tended for decades. The soil that remembered everything. 2 months later, I got a letter. It was from Clarissa. Handwritten. No return address. Dear Eleanor, it began. I'm writing this from a place I never imagined I'd be, a county correctional facility. I was sentenced to 18 months for fraud and forgery. I'll probably serve 9 with good behavior. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or pity. I don't deserve either. I'm writing because I've had a lot of time to think about what I did. Not just the stealing, but everything that led up to it. The way I treated you. The way I dismissed your life's work. The way I tried to erase you from your own home. My therapist here says I was trying to create an identity for myself by stealing someone else's. That I felt so empty inside that I thought if I could just look successful enough, be admired enough, take credit for enough things, I'd finally feel like I mattered. But all I felt was hollow. Even when I was at my peak, thousands of followers, people commenting on my posts telling me I was living the dream, I felt nothing. Because it wasn't real. None of it was real. What you built with Arthur was real. 50 years of actual work, actual sacrifice, actual love for the land and each other. I try to put a pretty filter on it and call it mine, but you can't fake roots.
You taught me that.
I know I destroyed my marriage. I know I hurt your son. I know I tried to take something that wasn't mine to take. And I know that when you told me to eat with the pigs that day, you weren't being cruel. You were being honest. Because that's exactly what I deserved. But here's the thing you might not know. When you made me face consequences, publicly, completely, with no room to spin or hide, you actually saved me. Because for the first time in my life, I had to look at who I really was. Not who I pretended to be. Who I actually was. And I hated it. But I needed to see it. So, thank you. I know that sounds crazy. Thank you for not letting me get away with it. Thank you for protecting your family's legacy. Thank you for showing me that actions have consequences and that some things matter more than image. I don't expect you to write back. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that your father was right. You plant seeds and let time do the rest. You planted truth, even when it hurt. And something real might actually grow from it eventually. With genuine remorse, Clarissa. I read the letter 3 times. Showed it to Nathaniel. We sat at Arthur's table, properly reassembled, properly placed, and talked about it. Do you believe her? He asked. I think I do, I said. Or, at least, I believe she believes it right now. Whether it lasts, that's up to her. Are you going to write back?
I thought about that.
About grace and boundaries. About forgiveness and wisdom. No, I decided. She's on her own path now. Whatever she becomes, whatever she learns, that has to be hers. I can't save her. I can only protect what matters to me. But I did do something. I made a donation to the County Correctional Facilities Education Program, in Clarissa's name, for classes on financial literacy, business ethics, and agriculture. Not for her. For whoever she might become if she really did the work. 3 weeks after that, something unexpected happened. I was in town at the farmer's market when a young woman approached me. She was maybe 25, with 2 small children clinging to her legs. Mrs. Whitlock, she said nervously. Yes, I'm Sarah. I worked at the discount store where your former daughter-in-law worked for a while. Before her sentencing. All right. I just wanted to tell you something.
She talked about you sometimes.
About what happened.
And
Sarah shifted uncomfortably. She told me that if I ever had the chance, I should tell you that you were right. That she deserved everything she got. That she hoped you and your son were okay. I looked at this young woman, at her children, at the grocery bags she was struggling to carry. She was kind to my kids, Sarah continued. When she didn't have to be. She'd help me load groceries. She never acted like she was better than the job, even though everyone knew her story. And she told me once that the hardest part wasn't the shame. It was realizing how much she'd hurt people who'd only tried to help her. "Thank you for telling me," I said. As Sarah walked away, I thought about redemption, about whether people could really change, or if they just learned to pretend better. I didn't know. Maybe I'd never know. But standing there in the farmer's market, surrounded by vegetables and bread and honest work, I realized something important. Clarissa's story wasn't mine to finish. I'd done my part, protected what mattered, defended my family's legacy, taught the lesson that needed teaching. What she did with that lesson, that was between her and whatever version of herself she was trying to become. 6 months later, the Heritage Center was thriving. We'd hosted 12 school groups, 6 agricultural workshops, and 2 farm-to-table dinners that actually celebrated real farming instead of performing it. Nathaniel had hired 3 part-time staff members, all local people who needed work, and Tommy had been promoted to operations manager. The farm was profitable again, properly managed, protected. One evening I walked out to the pig pen. Hamlet, Beatrice, and Ruth were settled in for the night, snoring contentedly. I stood there thinking about the day Clarissa had pointed at this spot and screamed at me, "Why don't you go eat with the pigs, Eleanor?" At the time, those words had felt like the worst humiliation of my life. But standing there now, I realized they'd actually been a gift. They'd show me exactly who I was dealing with, given me the final push I needed to stop being patient and start being strategic. Sometimes the cruelest thing someone says to you becomes the thing that saves you. I heard footsteps behind me. Nathaniel, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might be out here," he said, handing me one. Just remembering. The pig comment, among other things. We stood there together, father and son, watching the sunset paint the fields gold and red. "You know what the best revenge is?" I said finally. "What's that?" "No revenge at all. Just living well. Just protecting what matters. Just being here, on this land, doing this work, while everyone who tried to take it from us fades into memory." Nathaniel smiled. "Dad would have said something like that. Your father was a wise man. So is his wife." We walked back to the house together as the stars began to appear. The same stars that had watched over this farm for generations. The same sky that would watch over it for generations to come. Inside, the kitchen smelled like bread. The table, Arthur's table, was set for dinner. Everything was exactly as it should be. Not perfect, not performative, just real, just home. And in the end, after all the drama and betrayal and careful justice, that was what mattered most. Not punishing Clarissa, not getting revenge, not even proving I was right, just protecting home, just being the guardian my husband trusted me to be, just making sure that when my time came to pass the torch, I'd be handing down something real, something earned, something that would last. My father used to say, "Plant seeds and let time do the rest." I'd planted truth, defended legacy, protected family. Now I could rest, knowing the harvest would be good. If Eleanor's story inspired you, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss our next powerful story. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Did Eleanor do the right thing? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against someone who underestimated you? Your story might inspire someone else who needs to hear it. Like this video if you believe in quiet justice and the power of patience. Share it with someone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself is always worth it, no matter how long it takes. Thank you for being part of this family. We'll see you in the next story.